It was a quiet Sunday evening when the doorbell rang, shattering the calm of a family dinner. Sarah, a single mother of two, opened the door to find a uniformed officer, his hand already on his taser, eyes cold and unyielding. Without warning, he deployed the taser, sending her crumpling to the floor in front of her screaming children, only to pull a crumpled court order from his pocket moments later, read it, and freeze. His face drained of color as he realized the devastating mistake he'd just made. Sarah had always been the kind of person who kept her head down and her life in order. A 38-year-old single mother, she worked long hours as a nurse to provide for her two children, 12-year-old Mia and 9-year-old Ethan. Their small, tidy home in a quiet suburban neighborhood was a place of routine and warmth, where Sunday dinners were sacred. That evening, the table was set with roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans, the kids laughing over a silly story Ethan was telling about his science teacher. The doorbell's sharp chime cut through their chatter like a knife. Sarah wiped her hands on a dish towel and walked to the door, expecting a neighbor or perhaps a delivery. Instead, she was met by a tall, broad-shouldered police officer, his badge gleaming under the porch light. His expression was stern, his hand resting on the taser at his hip. "Sarah Marie Thompson?" he asked, his voice clipped and authoritative. "Yes, that's me," Sarah replied, her brow furrowing. She glanced back at the kids, who were now peering curiously from the dining room. "Can I help you, officer?" The officer didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stepped forward, his posture rigid, his eyes scanning her as if assessing a threat. "Step outside," he ordered, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. Sarah's heart quickened, but she complied, stepping onto the porch. She didn't understand what was happening, but she didn't want to escalate things in front of her children. "What's this about?" she asked, her voice steady despite the growing unease in her chest. The officer's hand moved to his taser, and before Sarah could process what was happening, he shouted, "Don't move!" The next moment was a blur of pain and chaos. The taser's prongs hit her chest, and a jolt of electricity coursed through her body. She collapsed, her muscles seizing, a scream escaping her lips as she hit the ground. From inside, Mia and Ethan's cries pierced the air, their voices a mix of fear and confusion as they rushed to the doorway. "Mom!" Mia screamed, tears streaming down her face as she tried to run to Sarah. Ethan clung to his sister, his small frame trembling. The officer, unfazed by the children's distress, stepped over Sarah's crumpled form and pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. He unfolded it, his eyes scanning the text, and then he stopped. His movements halted, his shoulders stiffened, and the color drained from his face. He read the paper again, his lips moving silently, as if trying to make sense of what he was seeing. For a moment, he stood frozen, the court order trembling slightly in his hand. Sarah, still gasping for breath on the ground, managed to choke out, What's going on? Why did you do that?" The officer didn't answer immediately. He looked from the paper to Sarah, then back to the paper, his expression shifting from authority to something resembling panic. This isn't right," he muttered, almost to himself. He took a step back, his hand dropping the taser to his side. Inside, Mia was sobbing, clutching Ethan, who was too stunned to speak. Neighbors had begun to gather, drawn by the commotion, their whispers forming a low hum in the background. Sarah struggled to sit up, her body aching from the taser's shock, her mind racing to make sense of the situation. "What's not right?" she demanded, her voice hoarse but firm. "Why are you here? What does that paper say?" The officer, whose name tag read Officer Daniel Carter, seemed to snap out of his daze. He cleared his throat, avoiding Sarah's gaze. "Ma'am, I need to call this in," he said, his voice unsteady. He fumbled for his radio, his fingers clumsy as he pressed the button. "Dispatch, this is Carter. I need verification on a court order for 1427 Maple Drive. There might be an issue." Sarah's mind reeled. An issue? She'd never been in trouble with the law, never even had a parking ticket. She was a nurse who spent her days caring for others, A mother who made sure her kids did their homework and ate their vegetables. What could possibly justify an officer showing up at her door and tossing her in front of her family? As the officer spoke into his radio, Sarah pulled herself to her feet, leaning against the porch railing for support. Mia and Ethan ran to her, wrapping their arms around her, their faces streaked with tears. "It's okay," she whispered, though her voice trembled. "I'm okay. We're going to figure this out." The radio crackled, and a voice came through, too muffled for Sarah to make out the words. Officer Carter listened, his face growing paler with each passing second. When the transmission ended, he turned to Sarah, his expression a mix of guilt and dread. "Ma'am," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I need you to come with me to the station. There's been a mistake." "A mistake?" Sarah's voice rose, her anger cutting through the pain. "You tossed me in front of my kids. You scared them half to death. What kind of mistake justifies that?" The officer didn't answer. He looked at the court order again, then back at Sarah, his jaw tight. "Please, ma'am. Just come with me. We'll sort this out." Sarah wanted to scream, to demand answers right then and there, but she saw the fear in her children's eyes and knew she had to stay calm for their sake. She nodded to a neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, who had been watching from her lawn. "Can you stay with the kids?" Sarah asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "Of course, honey," Mrs. Jenkins said, hurrying over to usher Mia and Ethan back inside. "I'll take care of them. You go get this sorted." At the police station, Sarah sat in a small, sterile room, her wrists sore from the taser's aftereffects. Officer Carter sat across from her, flanked by another officer, a woman who introduced herself as Sergeant Linda Hayes. The court order lay on the table between them, its edges creased from being folded and unfolded. Sergeant Hayes took the lead, her tone calm but professional. "Ms. Thompson, I'm deeply sorry for what happened tonight. There was a significant error in the execution of this court order. Can you confirm your full name and date of birth for us?" Sarah provided the information, her voice flat. "What's this about? What does that paper say?" Sergeant Hayes exchanged a glance with Officer Carter, who hadn't spoken since they arrived. She slid the court order across the table. "This is a warrant for the arrest of a Sarah Marie Thompson, but the details, address, date of birth, and other identifiers, don't match you. The warrant was issued for a woman with the same name, but she resides at a different address, in a different county." Sarah stared at the paper, her eyes scanning the text. The name was hers, but the address was unfamiliar, and the charges listed, failure to appear in court for a drug-related offense, were absurd. "This isn't me," she said, her voice shaking with a mix of relief and fury. "I've never been arrested. I've never even been to that county. How did this happen?" Sergeant Hayes sighed, her expression heavy. "It appears there was a clerical error in the system. The warrant was sent to our precinct with your address listed instead of the correct one. Officer Carter was acting on the information provided, but the use of force was not justified given the circumstances." Sarah's eyes flicked to Officer Carter, who was staring at the table, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. "Not justified," she repeated. "He didn't ask me any questions. He didn't verify anything. He just tossed me in front of my kids. Do you know what that did to them? To me." "I understand your anger, Ms. Thompson," Sergeant Hayes said, her voice steady but empathetic. "We're launching a full investigation into this incident. Officer Carter has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome. We'll also be contacting your family to ensure they're supported through this." Sarah shook her head, tears welling up for the first time since the ordeal began. "Supported? My kids saw their mother collapse on the ground. They're traumatized. I'm traumatized. And all you can say is it's an error." The room fell silent, the weight of Sarah's words hanging in the air. Officer Carter finally looked up, his eyes meeting hers for the first time. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely audible. I was following protocol. I didn't know." Sarah didn't respond. She didn't trust herself to speak without screaming. Instead, she focused on the court order, the piece of paper that had turned her life upside down in a matter of minutes. She wanted answers, not apologies. She wanted to know how a system could fail so spectacularly. How a simple mix-up could lead to such a violation of her dignity and safety. Over the next few weeks, Sarah worked with a lawyer provided by a local advocacy group that specialized in cases of police misconduct. The investigation revealed a chain of errors that began with a data entry mistake at the county clerk's office, where Sarah's address had been incorrectly linked to the warrant. The error was compounded by a lack of verification at the precinct, where the warrant was assigned to Officer Carter without cross-checking the details. The taser's use, the investigation concluded, was a result of Officer Carter's overzealous response to what he perceived as a non-compliant suspect, despite Sarah's cooperation. The findings were cold comfort to Sarah. She struggled with anxiety in the weeks that followed, jumping at loud noises and checking the locks on her doors obsessively. Mia and Ethan were quieter than usual, their usual chatter replaced by a cautious silence. Mia started sleeping in Sarah's room, saying she felt safer there, while Ethan began drawing pictures of police officers with angry faces, something his school counselor flagged as a sign of trauma. Sarah's lawyer pushed for accountability, filing a civil suit against the police department and Officer Carter. The suit alleged excessive force, emotional distress, and negligence, seeking damages to cover therapy for Sarah and her children, as well as punitive damages to send a message. The case drew attention from local media, with outlets running stories about the wrong Sarah, who was tossed in her own home. Community activists rallied around Sarah, organizing protests outside the police station and calling for reforms to prevent similar incidents. As the legal battle unfolded, Sarah found herself grappling with conflicting emotions. She was angry at Officer Carter, at the system that had failed her, at the injustice of it all. But she was also determined to turn her pain into something meaningful. She began speaking at community forums, sharing her story to raise awareness about the need for better training and oversight in law enforcement. She connected with other families who had experienced similar violations, finding strength in their shared resolve. Officer Carter, meanwhile, faced his own reckoning. The investigation led to his termination from the police force, a decision that sparked debate in the community. Some argued he was a scapegoat for a flawed system, while others insisted he should have faced criminal charges. Sarah didn't care about the debates. She cared about her children, about rebuilding their sense of safety, about ensuring no other family would go through what they had. Months later, as the civil suit moved forward, Sarah received a letter from Officer Carter. It was handwritten, its words careful and deliberate. He apologized again, this time in detail, acknowledging the fear and pain he had caused. He wrote about his own regret, how he hadn't slept properly since that night, how he was seeking counseling to understand his actions. He didn't ask for forgiveness, only for Sarah to know that he carried the weight of his mistake every day. Sarah read the letter once, then set it aside, unsure how to feel. She didn't owe him a response, and she wasn't ready to give one. Instead, she focused on her family, on healing, on moving forward. The case was still pending, but Sarah had already made a decision. She would not let that night define her or her children. They would be stronger for it, she told herself, even on the days when that felt impossible. The Sunday dinners resumed, though the laughter was quieter now, the joy tempered by memory. But Sarah held her children close, their resilience a reminder of why she kept fighting. The court order, that crumpled piece of paper, had changed their lives forever, but it would not break them.